many grandchildren. I was told I have 7 to 10 minutes to share about Grandpa's life today. This sounded pretty easy until I thought about how in the world one sums up 90 years of life in 10 minutes. This is even more challenging considering Grandpa really lived his life. He was strong and determined and refused to give up. And I think didn't really know how someone in their 80s and 90s was supposed to behave or what was going to happen to his body as it aged. Grandpa never would stop working on the farm. He always had many projects to work on. It took a body that physically wouldn't allow him to complete a task, or Grandma Pearl calling one of the daughters to tattle on him, asking if they could come scold him because she felt he was doing something that was no longer safe for him to complete. Mowing, climbing ladders, and getting on the roof are just a few of the things he did well into his 80s. I sat down with my mom, my aunts, my Grandma Pearl, the day after Grandpa passed away, to get a few ideas about what they would like said and remember most about Grandpa Pat. In listening to everyone talk of Grandpa's life, I thought about a presentation at a conference that I attended last year. The speaker asked us to complete an activity. He said, imagine seeing yourself going to a funeral, picture yourself driving to that funeral, walking into the church, and as you walk down the aisle, you discover that this is your funeral. The exercise continued and asked us to write down what we would like various people, our spouse, our children, our friends, our coworkers, to say and remember about us during the funeral. As the exercise progressed, all of us realized every item had to do with our character and how we loved others, not our accomplishments or status. Although Grandpa was very successful and proud of his accomplishments, these are not the things that we will remember him for. There are many stories that can be told about Grandpa, and there's no way for me to fit them all in. But I think I can sum up his 90 years on this earth with 3 main intertwined themes: family, community, and faith. Family and his heritage was a #1 priority for Grandpa. If you know anything about Pat, you probably know he's Irish. He often celebrated and was proud of his heritage. He also lived a bit like an Irishman. I don't think I've ever met anyone more stubborn. He loved a good whiskey and had a love for visiting Ireland and listening to Irish music. We of course can't talk about family in his adult life without first talking about how it all started when he met Grandma Pearl. I'm told Grandpa was supposed to go to a dance with another woman who couldn't attend last minute and convinced Pearl to go in her place. In reading Grandpa's obituary, you know that this resulted in 65 years of marriage, 6 daughters, 11 grandchildren, 14 grandchildren, and several in-laws. What his obituary won't tell you is how in love he was with Pearl, even after 65 years. He became a true softie in the last few years, and we started seeing the depth of his love for her. To his last days, he would tell you, meeting Pearl was the best day of his life, and she was the best thing that ever happened to him. Each daughter told me they remember as little girls, Grandpa ensuring that he gave hugs and kisses every night before the girls would go to bed. He was also dedicated to spending time with his mother when she was alive. He spent every Sunday afternoon visiting his mom after church, followed by a trip to A&W for the girls and driving around to check the cornfields. Part of being a family man in my grandpa's eyes was to support his family without them worrying about when times were tough. There were years when farming was bad and he nearly lost everything. It wasn't until years later that the family realized how trying the times were. He never let the stress of wondering how he was going to make ends meet extend into the home. About 3 years ago, Grandpa was admitted to the hospital in Texas. I flew down there to help support Grandma and figure out what was going on. I remember Grandpa being fairly stoic most of his life, especially when it came to praising his grandchildren, and I imagine you daughters as well. He had high expectations. However, when I was in Texas, my view on this changed a bit. When asked what he would like Grandma and me to bring him to the hospital, his only requests were round-tip toothpicks, a comb, a bag of wintergreen lifesavers, and several framed photos of our family to set around his hospital room. He was so proud of these pictures, and there wasn't a nurse or an aide who could exit his room without looking at the pictures and hearing a story or two about a daughter, a son-in-law, or a grandchild. He was proud of every one of us. I was also asked by my mom and aunts to bring a bouquet of flowers to help brighten up his room. He stared at those flowers all day and eventually even started crying. In his weakest moments, he wanted nothing more than to be back in South Dakota with all of his family. I have worked with dozens of elderly people over the years, and I find a common theme with many of them during their last few months of life. They are, for the most part, ready to leave this world. I was a bit puzzled by Grandpa because, as Father Larry stated last night, he was never really ready to let go. After the last couple of weeks and the number of people who have come to see Grandpa or been around to support Grandma and the family through the last few challenging days, I now know why he was hesitant to leave this life. He always had something to live for and a bond with his family like few are lucky to experience. I remember several years ago asking him if he was ever disappointed that he never had a son. He told me of a story of when his daughters were born. During those days, he was not allowed in the hospital room during the delivery. There was another gentleman sitting next to him who was also waiting for his wife to deliver a baby. The blue light came on, and Pat thought maybe it was his, but it was actually for the other one. In the end, he said he never really cared about the fact that he never had a son, which is strange, considering he was a farmer and could use lots of help. But I think he knew in his last days, daughters are much better caring for him, which was definitely lived out. The next thing Grandpa will be remembered for is for his commitment to community. Not only was he a member of several organizations, associations, and boards, but he also found ways to help others, to be an active participant in the community, and he loved to socialize. He would often anonymously donate money or meat from a cow or hog to families in need. He enjoyed sharing his knowledge of farming with younger generations and enjoyed helping neighboring farmers get their work done when in need. He created several jobs for farmhands over the years. I hear he would trick the new ones into signing up for the honey wagon. This sounds nice, but from my understanding, it involves a lot of manure. Grandpa had a love for antique cars and wanted others to enjoy these as well, by driving the cars in countless parades and weddings. He had strong political beliefs and did what he could to advocate for his party. His house always had an open-door policy. He loved visitors and all were welcome. He loved to celebrate and host parties at the farm, which he knew would be successful with Grandma's careful planning and delicious cooking. During a recent care conference, as we started to realize that Grandpa's days were numbered and he joined hospice care, he had one request. He was still going to go to cardiac rehab. The stubborn, determined side of him refused to give up and let his body get weak just because he had entered hospice care. And the social side of him wanted to continue seeing the staff that he grew fond of at the rehab facility. And getting a meal at the frying pan afterward wasn't so bad either. As we mourn Grandpa today, there are many things that will be different without him here. It already feels different turning onto Willowdale Road, knowing that Grandpa physically isn't at the farm with us. I know his brothers will miss their long phone conversations with their big brother, and Grandma, my heart aches for you as you begin to navigate life without Grandpa by your side. However, I hope you all find comfort not only in the 90 good years he had, but also in the way he left this life, which is the exact way he lived it, surrounded by family. Several family members made the trip to the farm last Saturday to say their last goodbyes. Grandpa made sure not to go anywhere until every last person made it to the house. The house was as full as any holiday that we ever celebrated at the farm. I believe there were only over 20 family members in Grandpa's room alone as he took his final breaths, and of course he was holding Grandma Pearl's hand. Finally, he passed living out his faith. My Aunt Mary suggested that we say the Lord's Prayer. We all held hands, and as soon as we started reciting the Our Father around Grandpa's bed, he took his last few breaths. I believe this is no coincidence and is a testament to his faith and the fact that he will be waiting for us in the next life.